It was a bright and sunny Saturday morning. The kind of day where you can hear birds chirping happily in the trees and see kids running around, laughing and playing outside. The air smelled fresh like grass and flowers, and the sun made everything look warm and golden. For me, Jake Riley, it was just another normal day. I was in my driveway messing around with my old pickup truck. I love that truck. It's not fancy or new, but it's mine, and I like fixing it up. I'm not some big, important guy, just a regular person who enjoys tinkering with stuff. I've always been that way. Give me a screwdriver and something broken, and I'm happy. My house is small, with a little front yard and a driveway where I keep my truck. It's in a quiet neighborhood, the kind where people wave at each other and dogs bark sometimes. Most days it's peaceful, but not everyone here is easy to get along with. Across the street from me lived a lady named Linda Harper. She was different from the rest of us. Linda was the boss of our homeowners association, or HOA for short. That's a group that makes rules for the neighborhood, like what color your house can be or how tall your grass can grow. Linda took her job very seriously, too seriously if you ask me. Everyone in the neighborhood had a nickname for her. We called her HOA Karen. We didn't say it to her face, of course, that would have caused trouble, but behind her back it's what we whispered. Why? Because Linda acted like she owned the whole street. She walked around with a clipboard in her hand, writing down anything she didn't like. Her eyes were sharp and her glare could make you feel small, like she was staring right through you. It was so strong, it felt like it could melt metal. And oh boy, did she love sticking her nose into other people's business. If your mailbox was a little crooked or your trash cans stayed out too long, Linda would know. She'd knock on your door or leave a mean note telling you to fix it. Most people in the neighborhood tried to stay away from her. They'd see her coming and duck inside their houses or pretend to be busy. No one wanted to deal with her complaining or her rules. Me, I didn't hide. I wasn't scared of her. When she'd walk by with that clipboard, I'd just smile and wave. "Morning, Linda," I'd say, nice and friendly. She'd nod back, but her lips would stay tight, like she didn't really mean it. I figured if I stayed polite, she'd leave me alone. And most of the time, she did. I wasn't causing any big problems, so she didn't have much to say to me. At least, not until that Saturday. That morning started out like any other. I woke up early, ate some cereal, and headed outside to work on my truck. I had my toolbox open on the ground, a rag in my pocket, and the radio playing soft music. The truck's hood was up, and I was fiddling with a few wires, trying to get the engine to run smoother. It was a perfect day for it, warm but not too hot, with a little breeze blowing through. I wasn't bothering anyone. The street was quiet, except for the sound of my tools clinking and the birds singing overhead. I figured I'd spend a few hours out there, then maybe grab a soda and relax. Simple, right? But then I heard it, the sound of a door slamming. I looked up from under the hood and saw Linda storming out of her house across the street. Her face was red and her eyes were locked on me. She didn't walk slow like usual. No, she marched like she was on a mission. Her flip-flops smacked the pavement with every step, loud and angry. In one hand she held her phone, her fingers already moving fast, like she was dialing someone. In the other hand was that famous clipboard, flapping as she moved. I straightened up, wiping my hands on my rag, and watched her come closer. Something was different about her today. She wasn't just annoyed, she looked mad, really mad. I squinted at her, trying to figure out what was going on. What had I done? I hadn't painted my house a weird color or left junk in my yard. My grass was cut, my trash cans were in. So why was she charging at me like I'd broken some big rule? Then I saw where her eyes were pointing, right at my truck. Not the whole truck though, just one little part of it. My car antenna. Yep, that's right. A tiny metal stick poking up from the top of my truck. It wasn't even that tall, maybe 2 feet if that. I'd put it there myself a while back so I could listen to the radio while I worked. It wasn't fancy or loud or anything special, just a plain old antenna. But to Linda, it was like I'd built a giant tower in my driveway. She stopped a few feet away from me, her hands on her hips, glaring at that antenna like it had insulted her. "Jake Riley," she shouted, her voice sharp and loud. I could tell she was about to start one of her big rants. "What is that thing?" she demanded, pointing at the antenna with her clipboard. I tilted my head, confused. It's an antenna, Linda," I said, keeping my voice calm. "For the radio." She shook her head fast, like I'd said something ridiculous. "No, no, no," she snapped. "That's not allowed, it's ugly, it's against the rules." I scratched my head, still not getting it. Ugly, it was just a little stick. How could it bother anyone? "I don't think there's a rule about antennas," I said, trying to be nice. "It's not hurting anything." But Linda wasn't listening. She waved her phone in the air like a weapon. "Oh, you'll see, Jake," she said, her voice getting louder. "I'm calling the police. They'll make you take it down." I blinked at her. The police for an antenna. That sounded crazy even for her, but she was serious. She started punching numbers into her phone, muttering about how she was in charge and how I couldn't ignore her. I leaned against my truck, watching her. Most people might have gotten mad or scared, but I didn't. I just stood there, letting her yell. See, I'd learned a long time ago that arguing with Linda didn't work. She'd just talk over you until you gave up. So I stayed quiet, my hands in my pockets, waiting to see what would happen. She thought she had me trapped. She thought she was going to win like always. But here's the thing she didn't know. Her big plan was about to backfire in a way she'd never expect. Let me back up a little. Earlier that morning, before Linda came storming over, I'd noticed something strange. I didn't think much of it at first, but now it was starting to make sense. While I was working on my truck, I'd seen 2 guys hanging around Linda's house. They weren't from the neighborhood, I'd never seen them before. They wore dark jackets and moved fast, sneaking through her backyard like they didn't want anyone to spot them. I figured maybe they were fixing something, but they didn't have any tools. And then there were those boxes. A big pile of them, stacked up near her garage, covered with a tarp. They'd been there for a few days, and I'd wondered why she hadn't moved them inside. At the time, I didn't care much. It wasn't my business. But now, watching Linda freak out about my antenna, I started to wonder. Why was she so worked up over something so small? Was she trying to distract me, or was she just that picky? Either way, she had no idea what was coming. That antenna she hated so much, it was about to turn her whole world upside down. She thought she was calling the cops on me, but she didn't know they were already watching her. And not because of some silly HOA rule. So there I was, standing in my driveway, the sun shining down, birds still chirping like nothing was wrong. Linda was on her phone, yelling at someone about my truck, thinking she was the queen of the neighborhood. I didn't say a word, I just watched her, a little smile tugging at my lips. This was going to be good, really good. Want to know what happened next? Stick around, because this story's just getting started. Trust me, you won't believe how it ends. Linda came stomping over to me, her flip-flops making loud smacking sounds on the pavement. She looked mad, really mad. Her face was all scrunched up and her eyes were glaring right at my truck. "Jake," she yelled, her voice sharp like a dog barking. She pointed one finger straight at my pickup truck like she was accusing it of something bad. "That antenna is against the rules. It's an eyesore and I'm calling the cops." I just stood there blinking at her. The antenna, that little metal stick on top of my truck, it was barely 2 feet tall, hardly big at all. I'd put it there myself a while back so I could listen to the radio while I worked on my truck. It wasn't loud or shiny or anything fancy. It was just a simple thing to help me hear music. But the way Linda was acting, you'd think it was some huge, ugly monster sticking out of my driveway. To her, it might as well have been a giant neon sign flashing bright words like "break the law" for everyone to see. I didn't get why she was so upset. It didn't make sense, so I stayed calm and tried to talk to her. "Linda," I said, keeping my voice nice and steady, "it's just an antenna. There's no rule against that." I mean, I'd read the HOA rules before, those boring papers she was always waving around. I didn't remember anything about antennas being bad. But Linda didn't care what I said. She huffed, puffing out her chest like an angry bird. Her face turned red, like a tomato ready to burst. "Oh, you'll see, Jake," she snapped back, her words fast and loud. "I run this neighborhood. You don't get to ignore me." She held up her phone, shaking it in the air like it was some kind of magic wand. Then right there in front of me, she started dialing 911. Yep, the actual police. I couldn't believe it. She pressed the buttons hard, her fingers moving quick, and then she put the phone to her ear. "Hello, yes, this is Linda Harper," she shouted into it, loud enough for the whole street to hear. "There's an illegal structure in my neighborhood. It's a threat to safety." I tilted my head, listening to her rant. Illegal structure, threat to safety. She was talking about my little antenna like it was a dangerous weapon or something. I almost wanted to laugh, but I didn't. Instead, I just leaned against my truck, crossing my arms over my chest. The metal felt cool under my hands, and I watched her go on and on. She paced back and forth in her flip-flops, yelling into the phone about how I was breaking the rules and how she wouldn't stand for it. Her voice got higher and higher, like she was trying to sound tough. She thought she had me trapped. She thought she was winning, like she always did when she bossed people around. But here's the thing, she didn't know something important. She didn't know I'd already seen something weird that morning. Something she'd never want the police to find out about. I hadn't said a word about it yet, and I wasn't going to, not yet. I just kept quiet, letting her talk herself into a big mess. See, I'm not the kind of guy who gets loud or fights back right away. I like to watch and wait. And right now, watching Linda was like watching a storm cloud getting ready to drop rain. She didn't even know how much trouble was coming her way. Let me tell you what I'd seen earlier. It was before Linda came outside, when I was just starting to work on my truck. The sun was barely up and the street was super quiet. I was bending down, tightening a bolt, when I heard a noise like footsteps sneaking around. I looked up and peeked across the street at Linda's house. That's when I saw them, two guys I didn't know. They weren't from around here. They had on dark jackets and they were moving fast, slipping through her backyard like they didn't want anyone to see them. I thought maybe they were fixing something like her fence or her shed, but they didn't have any tools. No hammers, no ladders, nothing, just their hands and those jackets. Then I noticed something else. Near Linda's garage, there was a big pile of boxes. They were stacked up high, covered with a green tarp so you couldn't see what was inside. The boxes had been there for a couple of days, but I hadn't paid much attention until now. Why were they outside? Why didn't she put them in her house or her garage? It was strange, but I didn't think too hard about it at first. I figured it was her business, not mine. I'm not nosy like she is. I just went back to my truck and kept working. But now, with Linda standing there yelling about my antenna, those boxes and those sneaky guys popped back into my head. Why was she so mad about something so small? Was she trying to pick a fight with me for no reason? Or was there something bigger going on? Her face was all red and her hands were shaking a little as she held the phone. She kept glancing around like she was nervous about something. It made me wonder, maybe she wasn't just mad about the antenna. Maybe she was scared of something else. I didn't say any of that out loud though. I just stood there leaning on my truck watching her make a big scene. She finished her call and slammed her finger on the screen to hang up. "The cops are coming, Jake," she said, pointing at me again. "They'll make you take that thing down and you'll learn not to mess with me." She crossed her arms, looking proud, like she'd just won a prize. She thought she had me cornered, like a cat traps a mouse, but I wasn't worried, not one bit. See, Linda didn't know what I knew. She didn't know about the guys in her backyard or the boxes under that tarp. And she definitely didn't know that calling the cops might not go the way she planned. I kept my mouth shut, but inside I was starting to feel like this was going to be funny, really funny. She thought she was in charge, but she was about to find out she wasn't as smart as she thought. All because of a little antenna, and a secret she didn't want anyone to see. So there we were, Linda glaring at me, me leaning on my truck, and the sun shining down like nothing was wrong. The birds kept chirping and the breeze kept blowing. It was a perfect day except for Linda's big tantrum. She thought she was going to ruin my morning, but she had no idea what was coming. Want to find out what happened when the cops showed up? Keep listening, this story about to get even better. The minutes went by slow, like the clock was taking its time. Linda didn't stand still. She kept packing back and forth in my driveway, her flip-flops slapping the ground with every step. Every few seconds, she'd stop and throw a mean look my way. Her lips were curled up in a smug little smile, like she'd already won. "You're done, Jake," she said, her voice sharp and nasty. "The police are coming and they'll make you tear that antenna down, you'll see." She sounded so sure of herself, like she was the queen and I was just some silly kid who'd gotten caught. I didn't say anything back. I didn't argue or yell. I just stood there leaning against my truck watching her. I kept my hands in my pockets and my face calm, but while I watched, I started to notice something funny. Linda wasn't acting normal. Sure, she was mad about my antenna, but there was more to it. Every time a car drove by on the street, her head would snap around fast, like she was scared. Her eyes got big and she'd stop packing for a second, staring at the road. Then, when the car was gone, she'd start walking again, pretending nothing was wrong. Weird, right? Why would she care about cars driving by? It didn't make sense. That's when I started thinking harder. My brain went back to earlier that morning before Linda came storming over. I'd been outside working on my truck, just minding my own business. The sun was low and everything was quiet. I was bent over, fixing something under the hood when I heard a little noise like sneaky footsteps. I peeked up and looked across the street at Linda's house. That's when I saw them, two guys I'd never seen before. They weren't neighbors or friends or anything like that. They had on dark jackets, the kind you wear when you don't want people to notice you. And they were moving fast, sneaking around Linda's backyard. I remember thinking they didn't look right. They weren't carrying shovels or rakes or anything you'd expect from gardeners. Their hands were empty and they kept looking around, like they were making sure no one was watching. I didn't stare too long, I just went back to my truck. But now, with Linda acting so jumpy, it hit me. Those guys weren't there to help her plant flowers or fix her fence. They were up to something else. And then there were those boxes. I'd seen them too, stacked up high by her garage. They were covered with a green tarp, like she was hiding them. The pile had been there for a few days, but I hadn't thought much about it until now. What was inside those boxes? Why didn't she move them inside? It was all starting to feel strange. I didn't say any of this out loud, though. I kept my mouth shut and let Linda keep packing. See, I'm not the kind of person who jumps to big ideas right away. I don't like guessing without knowing for sure, but I'm good at noticing things, little details other people might miss. And right now I was noticing a lot. Linda thought she was in charge. She kept waving her HOA rulebook in the air, holding it up like it was some kind of super weapon. The rules say no ugly stuff in the neighborhood. She shouted at me, shaking the papers. That antenna breaks the rules and I'm going to fix it. She sounded so proud, like she was the sheriff of our street. But here's what she didn't see. Every time she looked back at her own house, her face changed. Her smug smile would drop for a second and her eyes would flicker with worry. It was fast, so fast you might not catch it if you weren't paying attention. But I was. She'd glance at her garage, then look away quick, like she didn't want me to notice. It made me wonder even more. Why was she nervous about her own house? What was she hiding over there? Those sneaky guys and those boxes, they had to mean something. And the more I thought about it, the more I felt like Linda wasn't as tough as she was pretending to be. I stayed quiet, just watching her dig her own hole. That's a saying. It means letting someone make a mistake all by themselves. I didn't need to fight her or yell back. I could tell she was already messing things up without my help. She kept talking, saying stuff like, "The cops will be here soon, Jake. You can't stop me." Her voice was loud, but it was starting to shake a little. She was trying to sound strong, but I could hear the wobble in it. She was nervous, and she didn't even know I could tell. The whole time, I just leaned on my truck, feeling the warm metal under my arms. The sun was still shining and the birds were still chirping. It was a nice day, even with Linda making a fuss. I didn't say a word about the guys or the boxes. I didn't ask her what she was up to. I just let her keep going, waving her rule book and packing around. She had no idea what was coming. She thought she'd called the cops to get me in trouble, but she didn't know they were about to turn this whole thing into her worst nightmare. See, I'd started to figure something out. Those guys in the dark jackets, the boxes under the tarp, Linda acting all jumpy. It was adding up to something big. I didn't know exactly what yet, but I had a feeling it wasn't good. And the best part, Linda had no clue I'd seen anything. She thought she was so smart, calling 911 over my little antenna. She thought she was going to win like she always did when she bossed people around. But this time, she'd made a mistake, a huge one. The minutes kept ticking by and Linda kept packing. She'd look at me, then at the street, then back at her house. Her flip-flops were loud and her rulebook was flapping in her hand. "You're going to be sorry, Jake," she said again, pointing at my antenna. "This is my neighborhood and I say what goes." But her eyes kept darting around and her hands were sweaty. She didn't know it yet, but she was in big trouble. Bigger trouble than she could ever imagine. And all because of that little metal stick on my truck. So I stayed quiet, watching her, waiting. The air felt thicker now, like something big was about to happen. Linda thought she was the boss, but she was wrong. She had no idea the cops she'd called were going to change everything. Want to know what happened when they got here? Stick around, this story about to get wild. The sound of sirens started far away, like a little whine in the air, but it got louder fast, screaming through the neighborhood. Linda's face lit up with a big, smug smirk. She looked at me like she'd already won everything. 2 police cars rolled up right in front of my house, their red and blue lights flashing bright. The tires crunched on the road as they stopped. "Here we go," Linda said, crossing her arms tight over her chest. She sounded so happy, like this was her big moment. A tall police officer stepped out of the first car. He had a serious face, the kind that says he doesn't mess around. He looked at my truck, then at me, and then at Linda. "We got a call about an antenna," he asked, his voice deep and calm. He glanced at the little metal stick on my truck, tilting his head like he wasn't sure what the fuss was about. Before I could even open my mouth to explain, Linda jumped in fast. "Yes, officer," she shouted, pointing at me like I was a bad guy in a movie. "It's him, he's breaking the rules. That antenna's not allowed." I just stood there, leaning on my truck, watching her. The officer raised one eyebrow, looking from Linda to me. He didn't seem too worried about the antenna, but he nodded anyway. "Sir," he said to me, "mind if we take a look around?" I shrugged my shoulders, nice and easy. "Go ahead," I said. I wasn't scared. I hadn't done anything wrong. My antenna was just a little thing for the radio. It wasn't hurting anyone, so I let them do whatever they wanted. I figured they'd see it was no big deal and leave. But then something crazy happened, something Linda didn't expect at all. Before the first officer even walked over to check my truck, the second cop got out of the other car. He was shorter, with a quick step, and he didn't even look at me. Instead, he walked straight toward Linda's house across the street. His boots hit the pavement hard and he didn't stop or slow down. Linda's smirk started to fade. She turned her head, watching him, and her arms dropped a little. "Ma'am," the second officer said, looking right at her, "we've actually been meaning to talk to you." Linda's face changed fast. All that red, angry color drained away and she went pale, like she'd seen a ghost. Her eyes got big and her mouth opened a little. "Me," she stammered, her voice shaky now. "Why?" She took a tiny step back, like she wanted to run but didn't know where to go. The first officer stayed near me, but he was watching her too. The air felt heavy all of a sudden, like a big storm was about to hit. I didn't say anything. I just kept standing there, my hands in my pockets, looking at the whole thing unfold. And here, where it gets wild, really wild. Remember those guys I'd seen earlier that morning? The ones in dark jackets sneaking around Linda's backyard. Turns out they weren't just random people. The police knew about them. They'd been watching Linda for weeks. Not because of my antenna or anything I did, but because of her. She'd been up to something bad, something secret. And those boxes by her garage, the ones under the tarp, they weren't just junk or old stuff she didn't want. They were full of stolen goods, things she wasn't supposed to have. The cops told us later that Linda had been part of some shady deal. That means she was working with people who took stuff that didn't belong to them, and she was hiding it all right there in our neighborhood. She thought she was so smart, keeping it under that tarp, but the police had figured it out. They'd been waiting for the right moment to catch her. Linda calling 911 about my antenna. That was just bad luck for her, really bad luck. She didn't know it, but when she dialed that number, she'd accidentally invited the police right to her doorstep. They weren't there for me, they were there for her. She'd handed them the perfect chance to come check things out without her even realizing it. I almost wanted to laugh, but I kept my face straight. This was too good. The second officer stepped closer to her, his hand reaching for something on his belt. "Linda Harper," he said, loud and clear, "you're under arrest." He pulled out a pair of shiny silver handcuffs and they glinted in the sunlight. Linda's mouth dropped open all the way now, like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. What?" she squeaked, her voice tiny and scared. "Arrest? For what? This is about his antenna." She pointed at me again, but her hand was shaking so bad it looked silly. The first officer shook his head. "No, ma'am," he said, stepping closer to her too. "This isn't about the antenna. We've been watching you. We know about the stolen stuff in your garage." Linda's eyes went even wider and she started shaking her head fast. No, she yelled. "That's not true. You've got the wrong person." But the cops didn't listen. They'd heard excuses before and they weren't buying hers. The second officer grabbed her arm, not hard but firm, and turned her around. "Hands behind your back," he said. Linda tried to pull away, but she